first tendency of a conductor, inexperienced conductor, would be when we were all from the orchestra. We all got up and put our instruments down and started conducting. Well, the thing you know best is the part of your section or your part. So the tendency would be to turn and start to criticize or make a comment about your section. Well, the rule was, do not pick on the whatever your section was. Don't pick on the violins. Don't pick on. For me, I was playing oboe in the orchestra, which got me into the school. By the way, I had hardly any experience, but they needed oboes, so that was very useful. I said, do not pick on the oboe. So all the rest of my life, I always have to gulp and think twice before I make any comment about the oboes in the orchestra, just because I was so brainwashed by Monteux's principle. Even though, of course, they needed it, but I was very, very careful to couch my criticism in the most positive way. So we had a conductor with a small orchestra in the South, and he was obviously not a string player. And what was up was the Prometheus Overture of Beethoven, which starts with these chords in the orchestra, told through the orchestra, and one slow 6/8 divided 3, chord, silence, silence, chord, silence. Well, the obvious thing is, of course, that the strings will do down bows, no question. But this naive man, he said, and we call Monteux maître, of course, maître, maestro in French. And so he turned to Monteux and he said, down bows, maître? And Monteux smiled and he didn't put him down. He said, just conduct, they will know. Just conduct. That was so very warm and understanding. But if somebody tried to be wise and smart, and he could be very sharp. But when somebody got up to conduct without a baton, he would say, you have 10 little batons, which one will they follow? So you had to use a baton, no question about that. It was inspiring. He knew his scores so thoroughly. He had them all there on the stand next to him, but he rarely consulted. We had a repertoire that's not quite as extensive as the present school, which has 6 weeks of repertoire. It was only 4 weeks, but I always felt I was at Juilliard at the time that I was in the winter, that I was in the summer, 4 summers with Monteux, and I felt that I got as much repertoire in the summer as I got the whole year in the conducting major class at Juilliard. So I had 2 years packed into one. It was wonderful. 1 year was all French music, and people came. That attracted people who wouldn't ordinarily come, like the music critic from the New York Herald Tribune, Robert Lawrence, who was a brilliant man. He was usually always on the Metropolitan Opera broadcasts, and he was an amateur conductor himself. He came, and he was in his 50s maybe at the time, and John Crosby came. That's when I met him in the French year, and he's the one who founded the Santa Fe Opera, and he was director until he died many years later. And I made some contacts. He invited me in 1960 to be assistant conductor and coach at Santa Fe from his contact at the Monteux School. Another contact I made was Francis Madeira, who I'm going to recommend that you see if you can possibly be interviewed. He was the founder of and conductor of the Rhode Island Philharmonic, and we became good friends. And when I got out of the Army, my 2 years of obligatory military service, he hired me to be an assistant conductor and first oboist of the Rhode Island Philharmonic. I was there 1 year, and the next year I was apprentice conductor of George Selwyn, the Cleveland Orchestra. It was a life-changing and a life-defining experience being with Monteux. The things I learned, the attitude, the high standards have been with me ever since. And I was, let's see, 83 going on 84 now. I was 18 going on 19 then. And this is very, very vivid memories. Monteux did not conduct us. He may have done one piece in the whole summer, but I don't even recall even that. I've seen him in rehearsals and in concerts in New York. And I know how efficient he was. And when he made comments to us, he would stop us, say exactly the right thing very succinctly, and go on. When he rehearsed, he would stop, say the right thing, and start before you knew even that things that he had stopped. But there was instant improvement. He went exactly to the point, what was exactly needed at that point. Things I learned about repertoire, about style. Brahms was very strong in his repertoire. He had actually played for Brahms as violist in the Geloso Quartet when he was a teenager, and they went to Vienna and got great praise from Brahms. It takes Frenchmen to play my music right. And so he was quite an authority on Brahms. We studied Brahms first one summer, and I asked him to autograph my score, which I had proudly had bound at the Juilliard Bindery. And he twinkle in his eye, he said, "They will think I am Brahms." and he signed Pierre Monteux on that. We had soirees. Once a summer, he would invite the class to his home down by the river over the hill. And that was his summer home. His winter home is on Route 1 on the highway for obvious reasons in the winter. But we'd go down there. That was where the school started. There was a theater there, a big room with a raised platform at the end, where about 10 years before my time, the school began with just pianists like Leon Fleischer. Vera Franceschi would play from scores, and they would conduct each other. Jonathan Sternberg, maybe still, he was there at that time, may be available to give his memories of that. Leon Fleischer, of course, too. And the soirees, we could ask him anything, ask him things about it. We were, of course, interested in the Rite of Spring. We never studied it in the school. We didn't have the orchestra for it, so we didn't attempt it. But we asked him, what about conducting, what do you do in conducting ballet? And he said simply, follow the feet. Yeah, you learn the steps, you learn what the dancers need. I've done a lot of dance conducting myself, and that advice was very vital for my activities with the Jose Limon Dance Company. Several times I toured with them all over the world, and in Pop's concerts we'd have guest ballets and ballet companies, and I would be assigned to conduct them, and that was I conducted for Martha Graham at the Blossom Music Center with the Cleveland Orchestra members, 2 performances in Appalachian Spring, and she wasn't no longer dancing, but she was still very much in charge, and it was a revelation for me which I had known the music of the suite for so long, but to see the complete ballet and see the original dance was a great thrill. I've been involved with that, and that my paper at the Conductors Guild Conference was on the many versions of Appalachian Spring, and hopefully it'll be published in the journal. But the editors have been very, very slow to look it over. Anyway. One point that I remember vividly about the Brahms variations on a theme by Haydn. That there's 5 bar phrases at the beginning, and after the double bar, the second oboe begins, then 1 bar, first oboe comes in, and there's 4 bars in piano. And then this pianissimo, subito pianissimo, 4 bars piano, da da dum bum ba da dum ba, la si do re, mi fa mi re. That's pianissimo, and that is structural. Many of the variations have in that same place the subito pianissimo from piano, and if you're wise to that structure and do it all. It all makes sense from the theme and the several variations that have that in that same place, the piano. So many conductors are unaware of that and don't make that distinction. And it's so very basic and important. For Monteux, it was basic and important. Now, when I was 18 and just deciding that I wanted to be a conductor, I'd been a pianist, studied piano since I was 5 years old. I decided to go to Bronx High School of Science because I was interested in science, and my dad, my father very wisely said, well, look, you're interested in science, you've been doing music since you're 5 years old, why don't you go to Bronx Science and see if that's the right path for you. If you go to music and art, you'll never know if science was something you should have done. So I went to Bronx Science, loved it. They even have a good music department, but I early on realized that I just love music so much. I had to be going to music somehow. So my advisor at Bronx Science, my college advisor, said, well, where do you want to go to college? I said, well, I want to go to a conservatory, a good music conservatory, but far away enough from New York that I don't have to come home on weekends. And he said, well, go to Oberlin. I said, fine. I didn't know where it was or anything about it. I applied, and I got in on piano. And there, Oberlin required a minor instrument or voice or organ or something. So I chose the oboe because, again, father's advice, it's too late for a string instrument, although I could have chosen the cello perhaps. But I could get further on the oboe, and indeed, it got me into Monteux school. It got me actually into Juilliard at first. So that was very valuable. Monteux was pleased that I improved on oboe. I was just a beginner, but it got me into the school that I didn't have any that season. 2 seasons, but how did I get to Monteux? When I was deciding that I wanted to be a conductor, and I'd been at Oberlin for 2 years, Isla Solomon was a well-known American conductor. He had been conductor of the Columbus, Ohio Symphony, and excuse me, was about to become conductor of the Indianapolis Symphony. And he was a friend of my father's through a mutual, through my old piano teacher. And he gave me advice. He said, well, you should go to Monteux school, try and get into Juilliard. And so I said, Monteux school, I didn't know about it, but I applied. And again, I got in because they needed oboes.
How did you apply? What was that like?
I did it before you could Google something. I just found out about how it was to write to the school, and the Joseph Baroni looked at my application, and he said, "Oh, I need oboes," so there was it. And I was given the opportunity to conduct after Monteux came. Actually, I conducted before he came, and then after he came, I sort of auditioned for him. I had a turn to conduct, and he saw that there was potential there, and so he let me be a member of the class from the beginning, the conducting class. 1 year was all Beethoven, 1 year was all French, and then it was the other 2 years I was there of the four were mixed repertoire. I remember the pieces that I was chosen to conduct on the gala concert. Once a year, the students conducted a concert, because the Sunday concerts were conducted by the administrator, Joseph Baroni, and he did programs that were semi-pops, light classics, and things. He also taught baton technique in the afternoons. We had mornings with Monteux in the class session. I remember Baroni driving Monteux from his summer house over the hill, and they'd come in the morning, right on time, and we conducted for him, and in the afternoon we had the baton technique, which was not as serious as we probably should have been about it, because Peroni was not Monteux himself. In 2 summers, there was always a concerto, usually a piano concerto in the repertoire. And 2 summers, I prepared them. I learned the piano solo part, Mozart C major concerto, Concerto 467, one summer, and Beethoven third piano concerto the other summer. And none of my colleagues who were pianists had taken the trouble or the ability to play them. So I got the opportunity to play them many, many times. Whenever anybody wanted to conduct a movement of a concerto, I was the guinea pig soloist. And Monteux was pleased to see that, because he had only known me as a beginning oboist, because that was really my instrument was the piano. One more thing about Brahms. Brahms' second was on the repertoire one summer. And the first movement was a very extensive first movement. And at the soiree, Monteux was asked, what does the Brahms second mean? What is the insight into what the Brahms second is? And he said, re, do, re. That was the germ of the first movement and much of the rest of the symphony, basic. But you wouldn't. It took a superior musician to get to that point of understanding. And that.
Yeah. So what were your were there any particular that stuck out in your mind?
If my head was in the score too much, and I confess that I didn't know my scores at that age, as I later learned to learn, he would say, you must have the score in your head like a virtuoso, meaning like a soloist. You know, that was important to know the scores better. Tempos. His corrections of our tempos were generally to slow us down. We were so excited, we did everything fast. And he calmed us down and gave us tempos that were not slow. There was intensity, but they were appropriately paced. And that was one of the big lessons, that our tendency was to go fast, fast, fast. And at a certain tempo, it's just everything works. You hear all the harmonies, you hear all the movement, and it seems faster. That was something that was very ingrained in us, that he would come, particularly the first times before he came. We would work on some pieces from the repertoire, and those are the pieces we would do for him when he came. And the first things he usually corrected was to put our tempos right. That was the most important thing. He didn't appreciate if somebody didn't close the score and was very haughty about knowing it from memory. Although one of my colleagues had a brilliant mind. And he was studying like composition at Yale with Hindemith, and he just knew the scores from memory, and Monteux understood he was legitimate and honest, and that was no problem. It was not just showing off. And he seldom did. Once somebody asked him if he should start at letter C, and Monteux said, "I am not Metropolis," referring to Dmitri Metropolis, the Greek conductor, who I saw at the New York Philharmonic, who memorized everything, every note, and all the measure numbers. But Monteux has a musical memory, and not the mechanical one, the visual memory that would visualize the place on the page and the measure numbers. He wasn't concerned with that, just the music, which he knew so thoroughly, every note.
Music making?
Well, the lessons I learned made me a better musician, gave me examples to emulate, and also simply it was an advantage to have been a student of Monteux's. It was on my resume. It was a credential that I was so proud of, and it was impressive to many people. I even feel that George Sell, whom I became apprentice conductor and had to audition for in person, was also influenced by the fact that I had studied with Monteux, who was one of the few conductors he respected and admired, along with Toscanini in his older generation. So it was both technically and artistically and professionally in the career a great credential and a great experience to have had in every way. Well, I attribute my growth as a conductor to so much that I learned. I was studying with Monteux in the summer and Jean Morel at Juilliard in the winter, two great French, very, very different temperaments. And just the musical values, the repertoire, the approach, and again, the credentials. When I put that on my resume, it was something that was very much respected and noticed. Monteux didn't often use extra musical imagery, but once when there was a conductor, James Robertson, he was a fine horn player and a very good conductor, and he conducted the Wichita Orchestra and college orchestra. Actually, his brother was dean of the Oberlin Conservatory when I was there, David Robertson. But Jim was conducting, and it was the seventh variation of the Brahms Haydn variations, which was this berceuse, this gondola song. You know, as a flutist, that very well. And he just wasn't getting the swing of it. And Monteux said, listen, Jim, have you never been in Venice with a little girl in a gondola? And Jim scratched his bald head and he said, with his Western twang, no, I don't recall. See, I don't think so. Yeah, but that was, he was trying to give them the feel of the motion of the water and the motion of the music. And so he used that imagery. Already existed.
But wasn't that across? It wasn't where it is today.
Yes, exactly.
It was I remember you told me that it was across the field or something.
No, it was in the same place. But what they've done since then is taken it off its foundation, made a new foundation,
right,
and extended the interior into what had been a porch, where people could listen from outside. So that just made it larger. No, but it was basically the present the building before it was reinforced and extended.
And Maestro sat in the center, or
he sat in the orchestra among the violas, where he had been. Where you can hear, he was a violist, violin, and then violist, and that gave him a perspective, because you hear the whole orchestra when you're in the middle of it. And he sat slightly off to this off center, in the violas. And Baroni sat next to him and supplied him with the scores, which he seldom looked at. And one summer, the summer of the French repertoire, I became the official accompanist of Monteux's niece, Virginia, named Ginia Davis. You see Ginia Wexler, her married name, as one of the memorial pieces of the persons who we memorialize. Virginia was a soprano who studied voice with her aunt, Doris Monteux, we call Mum. I wasn't privy to the voice lessons, but she had coachings with Uncle Pierre, and I played all her lessons with him, and they included Nuit d'été of Berlioz, Chanson de l'amour et de la mer, chanson, right? And on the repertoire that year was Scheherazade of Ravel, which she sang in concert, and Claude Monteux conducted that in concert. I prepared her and played it for her, and she learned the entire role of Mimi in La Bohème, and Monteux coached her. and that was a revelation. I was very, that was as instructive as I did a lot of opera conducting later in my career. But Monteux was very, he knew, of course, these pieces from memory. He had conducted. It's not remembered as well that he was an opera conductor. Besides being a ballet and a concert conductor, he conducted at the Metropolitan Opera. Even Rudolph Bing, when he came in, didn't know that Monteux had been at the Metropolitan before, and hired Monteux for operas like Samson, Delilah, Peleas, and Melisande, which were wonderful. Monteux was a great accompanist. I heard a concert in Brooklyn, actually, an orchestra that he was conducting, and a Chopin piano concerto, and he had the orchestra so modulated that every note of the soloist was heard. And he conducted with a long baton. And
the baton was long, right?
The baton was long.
Yeah.
You've seen the Chicago Symphony?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the tip of the baton was so eloquent, and it guided the music. He needed very few words. He had been in the orchestra. He understood the orchestra from the inside. He knew what made it work and what they needed. And he just went right to the core of things very efficiently. But that's what he taught us to do. When I was apprentice conductor and later assistant conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, Monteux came as a guest conductor. And he did the complete Daphnis and Chloe. And I played Celesta for him. I was so proud and pleased, and he was proud of me for being in that position. This was in 1963 or something, shortly before, a year before he died. And Madame Monteux was with him, and we stayed at the hotel across the way in the University Circle, and they invited me for tea in the afternoon between the concerts, between the rehearsals. And I just don't remember what we talked about so much, but it was just a thrill to have him conduct. I know that many members of the orchestra, of the students, invited him to guest conduct their small orchestras, and whenever possible, he did.
Wow.
He went around to small orchestras when his schedule permitted, and I'm sure a fee was not a question, and he did that as a courtesy and an example. He was very, very humble, very generous, and that was an example to me. And also teaching. I was hot to become a professional conductor. I knew I wasn't going to conduct the New York Philharmonic, but I thought I would conduct somewhere. And Monteux had confidence in me, signed a nice note, a portrait, a gift to everybody, and made a nice comment to me. But his example of teaching, that I knew that someday I would become a teacher, and give what I had been privileged and to receive from older, wiser, and professionals, teachers like him and like Morel and like George Sell, that teaching was something honorable and a part of a long tradition in the arts. And so I said, I always said to myself, when I get to know something, I'll teach it. I had to first learn it, and so I gravitated to teaching, and I've been at. I've always had private students seek me out, and I taught it. Before I taught at Mannes, I taught at Syracuse University. I conducted a scholarship orchestra. And one of the pieces they commissioned us, it was an anniversary, 40th anniversary of the orchestra or so, was the French composer Henri Dutilleux. Mm-hmm. He wrote a piece in 5 movements called Cinq Metabolisms, a thoroughly 12-tone piece that sounded so marvelously tonal. He was a great composer. Well, the Cleveland Orchestra had exclusive rights to it for a year. But in the score that was published after the piece was available for performances, it had a list of performances. Like the first performance, world premiere, the commissioned work was Cleveland Orchestra Sell. The very next performance that was not Sell in Cleveland was Charles Bruck with the orchestra in Europe. He had obviously done a great deal of very important contemporary music.